So I'm going to talk to you about 3 different studies. It's going to be a whistle-stop tour. I'm very happy to talk about some of the detail. I've shared a lot of similar experiences that Mikhail has already described with processing our data. But first of all, I think we're all here because we want to better understand diet so that we can tackle some of the biggest challenges that we see on this slide, and recognise that traditional methods of dietary assessment don't allow us to respond in a timely manner or scalable to the whole country. So while there are limitations with novel sources of data like transaction records and loyalty cards, they're at least scalable and timely, and they offer something slightly different. But how different are they? So the first study I want to talk about is actually a validation, just a calibration study, because these are our gold standard, but it's an evaluation of how well supermarket transaction records perform in a dietary assessment. And this was the STRIVE study, which was led by Victoria Jensen during her PhD, now a research fellow working with me. And we wanted to look at how well transactions represent intake as reported by a food frequency questionnaire, and in what context they perhaps better at the dietary monitoring. So this has just been published this month, so all the detail is in the paper, so I recommend you having a read. But for study design then, we recruited a cohort from one of the retailers in the UK. So the landscape's a bit different. So this was Sainsbury's, who are the second biggest retailer, but only have 15% of the market share. We have about a dozen that share that in the UK. And we've highlighted this as the pandemic kicked off in March 2020. So to actually make this happen is the first huge achievement. But we had a pilot to start with, and between pilot, we managed to tweak the process so that we could convert more people from being recruited into the study to actually completing the food frequency questionnaire and sharing their transaction data. So we ended up with 38% completion. This was interesting because we actually mailed, so the retailer mailed out an invitation and then they signed up to a study at the University of Leeds. We emailed 45,000 across 4 regions in the UK, and we had 4% uptake, which we thought was quite disappointing, but they reassured us that actually they only get 1% uptake. So we did really well here. And we did it across 4 seasons so that we could look into potential seasonal variation in agreement. So our sample then is very similar to the finished sample. I forget about the synergies until you present side by side, but predominantly female, predominantly middle-aged, white. Household size was 2.4 persons. It was a relatively affluent sample, which is typical of this particular retailer, but they were also relatively loyal, with 63% having more than 6 reporting 6% of their purchases here. But what did it actually look like? So we have individual line item transactions, so exactly which product, which brand they actually bought. And it's been a very lengthy process to link branded back of pack nutrition information to these products, and also the generic products that are not packaged. And that itself has been quite a mission to get the right data sources. But it does mean that we can look at nutrients by actual food. So what you're seeing here in the first column is the household purchases per day. When I say household, this is for the householder. We then estimate what that'd be for an individual using age-specific recommended intake to apportion the information. And what you see on the right is the absolute consumption per day from the FFQ, 15-item FFQ. And you are right in looking at this and seeing that actually, even at a whole household level, it's only 80% of what they're reporting from the food frequency questionnaire. And when you look at that at an individual level, that's about 50% of what they're reporting that they've eaten. And we all know the limitations with food frequency questionnaires as well, but I thought this was really interesting. However, when you look at that as energy adjusted nutrient estimates, so the dietary composition, which might be more akin with dietary patterns work, we actually see that they agree really well. So this is the percentage energy from each of the different macronutrients. It is kind of agreed about 90% of what we see. And for some foods, the total fat, saturated fat, those are really good agreement. So in the paper, we present bland hormone measures of agreement, but in the interest of time today, I've just shared these with you. So kind of to summarise that then, the purchase record from a single retailer it's not a good proxy of absolute intake. However, for a measure of dietary composition, it's actually a really good proxy measure. So we had stronger agreement for single person households, the most loyal customers, and for certain macronutrients. And we are now doing further research, which looks at agreement by different food groups, different demographic characteristics, and in the most well-defined by our customer samples. So with that in mind then, it's actually happened further research, but we're interested in what the patterns in the transaction data actually tell us about population diet. So this work was with my good colleague Stephen Clark. So Stephen was a statistician first, so I'm working in nutrition, Vicky was a nutritionist first, now working in data science. So we've got the same interdisciplinarity. So we had a sample of 300,000 loyalty card holders based in, who resided in Yorkshire and the Humber, a large region in the north of England. They were regular shoppers by our definition, which meant that they shopped at least 10 times per year in 7 out of 15 different food categories. Again, we had the individual product transactions for both food and alcohol this time, and that nutrient composition data matched in. For the purposes of dietary patterns, we used 82 food categories, which were the living costs and food survey categories, which is a kind of based on the COICOT classification, so an international classification. Again, our characteristics, the loyalty card holders were predominantly women, predominantly middle-aged. And from a point of view of deprivation, so this is our index of multiple deprivation decile, and we were hugely underrepresented in the most deprived. So this is what Yorkshire and the Humber should look like, this is what our sample was like, and we overrepresented in the most affluent. But just want to draw your attention to the fact that underrepresented is still 20,000 people or 20,000 households. And then we looked at the geodemographics as well. So we used k-means clustering to identify the 7 cluster solutions. So I'm going to dig into a few of these now and sort of bring them to life. So the one that we considered was the most healthy, we called it fruity, and there were almost 60,000 people purchasing this pattern. What you can see is in the middle of the radar plot here at 1, that's the average for the whole sample. So here we can see that this cluster are buying 2.5 times as many pairs average. And on the right, you can see the most popular foods and then the least popular foods within these clusters. So this one is dominated by, fresh fruits and berries. Interestingly, some sugar and sugar products in there. And at the bottom here is mostly alcohol and pastries and ready meals. And the next one that we classified as healthy was actually the meat alternative, purchased by 60,000. So this one here, we have then twice as many pasta products purchased, and then our meat alternatives being second place, followed by baby food. So when we're thinking about what sort of shopper this is, but now chaps in the office, we're thinking, young families want easy pastas, rice, sauces, and also with the baby food here. But at the other end of the scale, there's not a lot of meat at all. These are the least popular purchases from this group. So the last one I want to talk about is the one that is the least healthy, sweet tooth. Not as many consumers, but still a lot. And as you can see, this is 4 times the average purchases on soft drinks. Alcohol, sugary products, confectionery, and ready meals. The best thing they're getting is kind of pre-ready meals and a lot of fruit and veg and good stuff down here is the least popular. So we can look at this aligned with recommended intake. So this is our adult reference intake. So none of the only one of the patterns actually meets the adult reference intake for a household. But if we look here at fibre as a measure of healthiness, that fruity cluster is the highest with 21 grams per day. Our UK recommendations are 30 grams per day, but around the time of this cohort, it changed from 18 to 30. So more than I anticipated are actually buying for a household the recommended level of fibre. But down here in our sweet tooth cluster, they're really not getting very much at all. And again, if we look at this from a socioeconomic point of view, we look at the whole sample in this column, the most deprived at the top, what we're actually seeing is that our sweet tooth cluster is overrepresented in that most deprived, which is perhaps unsurprising, but interesting to see from the data. And our most healthy fruity pattern is actually overrepresented in super deprived or more affluent. Quite interesting in our beer and wine lover cluster. So this one was dominated by different beers and wine, but it's not the most deprived, and they're actually underrepresented in here, and it is our more affluent. This happens. The other way we can look at patterns is by matched to like a recommended diet. So in the UK, we have the Eat Well guide. This is what we're all supposed to consume. You can see the good stuff dominating here. This is our discretionary products. They don't even put them on the plate, but they say if you do have them, minimise to 3%. Many benefits have been modelled to say what would happen if we actually everybody moved towards this diet, both planetary health and personal health. So with the same sample then, what did we actually see? So this is the recommendations. So this time I've put those discretionary 3% in there just so that you can see it percentage of the total. And this is what the pattern actually looked like in the purchase behaviours of these customers. So I actually thought that 25% fruit and veg wasn't bad. I thought it was going to be much lower, but there's still lots more to do. But this 25% is discretionary items. We have looked at the cost, we have looked at other measures as well. So this is based on weight of the food purchased here. But there's a lot more interesting stuff to come from this. So how do we go about moving from this towards this? Because ultimately that's what we're all trying to do. So in the most recent work I've been doing, it's been working with multiple retailers to deliver in-store interventions and then look at what happens to the kind of product of the intervention, but also the wider basket using the Eat Well guide. So someone mentioned about categorization. So we did a manual categorization in the beginning, but now for the Eat Well guide, we've got an algorithm that uses natural language processing to put all the different products into Eat Well categories, which is something that's widely available. So what works for shift diet in about 2 minutes? This particular intervention was to reduce the price of fruit and veg of selected items in 2020 and 2021. So you can see there were more products available in 2020 than 2021. And we then got sales data for both of these years, and January 2019 as a baseline. This promotion ran for 4 weeks in January on stores. So this now is not loyalty card data, this is sales data from these stores, but linked transactions. We had linked basket to the transactions to the basket. So if we look at the pink baseline, you can see that there was a significant uplift of fruit and vegetables in both years. And we ran this but lower in 2021, which might be because we were actually in a COVID lockdown, so less people were going to stores, but there was also half as many products available. But what I really want to show you is, so over here you can see that the higher value and more tropical fruits perform better, which raises questions around sustainability. But this is the bit I want to talk to you about. So what does this do to the overall purchase pattern? So if we zoom in, this is Eat Well guide categories. So we've zoomed in on the fruit and vegetables and the discretionary products. In red was people who didn't buy any of these products at any time during that month. In yellow were people who bought one of those at least once in 2020, and green are the baskets that contained the promoted item. What we're seeing is that the basket that contains the promoted item, the total basket had 30% fruit and veg against that plate, which is much closer to the recommendation of 39%. And interestingly as well, it appears to displace the discretionary food and not something else. So we can see the kind of inverse here in that relationship between not engaged through to the basket. And just as a point of reference, we didn't see any change to proteins at all. So there are some things that we can do to start encouraging people to change their patterns. Financial incentives show progress both for the actual product that's promoted, but also the wider pattern, fruits that perform veg, and the effects we're offering. But in conclusion then, I still feel after doing this and all the work we're still doing that supermarket transaction data offer an awful lot of potential to understand population dietary patterns, but there's still much more work to do. So talking about bias, we need to understand those a lot better in our data, and it's something that we're working on at the moment. Unpicking these household versus individual measures, I feel like that's one of the another kind of strong criticism of loyalty card work. And then understand, including health and sustainability metrics in the data, all of which we are working on. And that's just then to say thanks to the funders that are supporting this and continuing to support it. So I'm an investigator at the Consumer Data Research Centre at the University of Leeds. We've been going since 2014. And these are two other UKRI funded grants, which are working with retail data, both for health and sustainability metrics, but also evaluating interventions. So kind of natural experiments from legislation and also in store. And I'm also working with social impact on